All right, everybody, back with another one. Today we're going to take a look at the meeting that Donald Trump recently had with Vladimir Putin on American soil. And we're also going to look at what's going on with the Ukraine-Russia war, and then just sort of talk about war in general and a breakdown of what war really is at its core and how we should look at it. So first we're going to jump into the video of Trump and Putin, and then we'll go from there.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We have very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, "Good afternoon, dear neighbor. Very good to see you. In good health and to see you alive." I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the US island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the US, and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the US pilots. And there are 2 flags, the US flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well, there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots are buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the US for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in a spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the US for 40 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later, we had to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue, naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work. And this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And special envoy of the president, Mr. Witkoff, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict, and his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand its history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation. However strange it may sound in these conditions, we have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us, a terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced
чтобы украинское урегулирование носило устойчивый и долгосрочный характер, должны быть устранены все первопричины кризиса, о которых говорили неоднократно. Обеспечен учет всех законных озабоченностей России, восстановлен справедливый баланс в сфере безопасности в Европе и в мире в целом. Я согласен с президентом Трампом, он сегодня говорил об этом, что, безусловно, должна быть обеспечена и безопасность Украины. Конечно, мы готовы над этим работать. Хочется надеяться, что достигнутые нами понимания позволят приблизиться к той цели и откроют дорогу к миру на Украине. Мы рассчитываем, что в Киеве и европейских столицах воспримут все это в конструктивном ключе и не станут чинить никаких препятствий, не будут предпринимать попыток за счет провокаций или закулисных интриг сорвать намечающийся прогресс. Кстати, с приходом новой администрации США двусторонний товарооборот начал нас повышаться. Все это носит пока такой символический характер, но все-таки плюс 20%. Я говорю о том, что у нас много интересных направлений для совместной работы. Очевидно, что российско-американское деловое и инвестиционное партнерство имеет огромный потенциал. Россия и США есть что предложить друг другу в торговле, энергетике, цифровой сфере, высоких технологиях и освоении космоса. Актуально видится взаимодействие в Арктике, возобновление межрегиональных контактов, в том числе между нашим Дальним Востоком и американским западным побережьем. В общем, нашим странам важно и нужно перелистнуть страницу и вернуться к сотрудничеству. Символично, что неподалеку на границе России и США, как я уже говорил, проходит так называемая линия перемены дат, где можно буквально перешагнуть из вчера в завтра. Надеюсь, что у нас так и получится в политической сфере. Я хотел бы поблагодарить господина Трампа за совместную работу, за доброжелательный и доверительный тон бесед. Главное, что с обеих сторон был настроен на результат. Мы видим, что президент США имеет четкое представление о том, чего хочет добиться, искренне заботится о процветании своей страны и в то же время проявляет понимание наличию в России своих национальных интересов. Рассчитывает, что сегодняшние договоренности станут опорной точкой не только для решения украинской проблемы, но и положат начало восстановлению деловых прагматичных отношений между Россией и США. Ну и в завершение хотел бы вот что добавить. Я помню, что в 2022 году, во время последних контактов с прежней администрацией, я тогда пытался убедить своего прежнего американского коллегу в том, что не нужно доводить до ситуации после наступления, которые могут наступить тяжелые последствия в виде боевых действий. И прямо сказал тогда, что это большая ошибка. И вот сегодня мы слышим, когда президент Трамп говорит, что если бы я был президентом, то войны бы не было. Я думаю, что так бы на самом деле случилось. Я подтверждаю это, потому что в целом у нас с президентом Трампом наладился очень хороший деловой и доверительный контакт. И у меня есть все основания полагать, что, двигаясь по этому пути, мы можем дойти и до, чем быстрее, тем лучше, до завершения конфликта на Украине. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound. And I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on. Most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate. And I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Radcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here. And I think, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time. And we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax. That made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, so there you have it. That's the full, meeting interview, post-meeting interview, where the two of them got the chance to speak to the press about what went on. And Trump said it right there in the interview that they didn't reach an agreement. Obviously, we know that now because it's been a couple days. But he did mention that they were close to brokering a deal, which is a good sign that we're making progress. A couple takeaways I wanted to observe from that. A lot of people online were focusing on the body language and who is the alpha in the room and all that stuff. And, Trump is definitely a domineering alpha man. He's definitely a strong presence. He is definitely he is for sure the world's leader of all leaders today. Maybe not throughout history, but at least in our time today, he is the toughest, strongest, most influential leader in the world. Because not only is he Trump, and he's such a polarizing figure, but he also is backed by the greatest nation in the world. If Trump was who he is, or was the president of another country that was almost as big as America, but not as big, would his personality be enough to make him the number one leader in the world? Maybe not. America throws a lot of weight behind somebody because we're the biggest, strongest superpower that ever existed. But Trump, we know he is the alpha in probably any room he ever walks into. But there's also a type of alpha that is an alpha at the same level, but knows how to dial it back as a matter of respect and trying to be at peace and trying to keep a good relationship so that whatever you're looking for, whatever your agenda is, you get to see that through to the end, and that you don't you don't make too many waves. So I wasn't too hung up on what I've seen with the body language because Putin's a tough guy and Putin's been president way longer than Trump has total. Putin's also, I believe, former KGB, high ranking, really tough guy. And something about him that's different than Trump is Putin's definitely had people killed before, which does change your character. It does make you a tougher person. But he might have also actually killed people himself. I mean, we don't know that, but he's a guy that is tough at some of the highest levels. You really only have a few world leaders today that are that tough. And you could all kind of put them on the same level, Trump, Putin, and Xi of China. These people are tough at a different level than the rest of the leaders in the world. There's no comparison really to some other world leaders. And it shows in their nation too. Behind America is China and Russia. Those are the next two biggest, strongest world superpowers. So it only makes sense that their leaders are all in line in terms of the alphas. And you look at a guy like Putin, yeah, he was in a foreign country. It's the first time he's ever done that in America. It's the first time he's taken that leap of faith and that chance. It's a different thing. Many people don't realize this because we just look at two world leaders meeting. But that's a big move. That's a big move to leave your land, the safety and the comfort of your land protected by your military, your police, your people backing you, and go to a foreign country. Yeah, you can bring a team with you, but it will never be enough. You're on their ground now. You got to trust that they're not going to do anything to you. And it could be the simplest thing. It could be as simple as, administering something to him when he's not paying attention or somebody who's watching him is not paying attention for a moment. It could be something that they, a sound wave, something that they put on his skin, something they put on his clothes, something that takes a while to kick in. It doesn't go into effect until he gets back to his country. There's so many risks that a world leader runs by going to another turf. And I give Putin a lot of credit for doing that because it does show that, yes, he wants things from America, of course, just like, Zelensky does from Ukraine. And they all come running to America because we are for sure the world's, out of all the countries, we're like the parent country. We're like the grandparent country. Even though we're the youngest in many ways compared to many countries out there, we are the one that all the other countries in the world, yeah, some countries have used and abused us, but every country needs America's help because the infrastructure that we've built and the economy that we've built and just the position that we're in, the military we've built, it's second to none throughout history. Bigger than Great Britain, bigger than ancient Rome, bigger than all these other, empires that were the biggest of their time. So everybody turns to America because we are number one and they all need us. But I give Putin a lot of credit because it takes a sense of a little bit of humility, even if it's not a lot, a little bit of humility to actually leave your nation, come to our nation, even if it's only a little bit over because he was in Alaska, which is right near Russia. It takes humility. It takes courage and it takes hope that everything's going to go as planned and there's not going to be any issues and there won't be any bad actors, even if they're not working with Trump, just people in America that don't want him to continue on or whatever. So I give him credit for that. And I give the both of them credit for doing this. But another big takeaway was if you looked at the background, it said pursuing peace. Now, obviously, I know Trump is gunning for the Nobel Peace Prize, and he's doing a lot of things around the world to declare peace. And it is a great thing because the world needs that right now. And it could be as petty and as vain as him just trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize to have another award, in his life's resume. But I don't think it's that. Everything that he is doing shows that he genuinely wants peace in the world, in the whole world. There are deals that he's brokering that really has no effect and impact on America. I mean, like a fraction, just because they're trade partners. Russia, China, those are bigger things. Yes, of course, like that. Even Israel and the Middle East, like those are bigger things that, yeah, definitely you can see that brokering a deal of peace would benefit America in the long run. But there are some other countries that he's brokered deals with that really have no impact on us, that the world, like America's world, could do without them or with them either way. And he's brokering deals for peace for no reason other than just to have world peace. So is it enough for him to do all this stuff just to win some stupid award, a peace prize? Nah, I don't think so. I mean, some people think he is, but I don't think so. It's not enough to do all this work, at that level, constantly running and gunning at his age, 80, almost 80 years old, just for some tokens, some novelty prize. It's not, yeah, it's one of the most prestigious awards in the world, but at the end of the day, it's just an award. It doesn't really mean much in the grand scheme of things. So I think he's doing it because he genuinely wants to see peace in the world. And that's what I'm going to get to in the next part of this, where we talk about and break down war. So essentially, we have a lot of wars going on in the world right now. We have wars outside of our country, Russia, Ukraine, big one, Israel and Iran, big one, even South Africa, the people in South Africa fighting the farmers and the people, I guess, in other parts of the country going against the people in the rural agricultural locations, fighting over land, fighting over, I guess you could call it class warfare. There's many things. And then there's even wars that are happening inside of our country, between politics, Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, same thing, pretty much along the same lines, but, two sides are a little bit further than the other. But even religious wars that we're experiencing now between different religions clashing in America, war is all around us. And what I'm seeing online, and I know a lot of you are as well, is especially with the younger generation, Gen Z, a lot of people are, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure a lot of this is because people are just trying to get likes and views and follows and all that stuff. And I understand that to a point, because it's a flooded market. People are constantly competing for attention, and you know, I get that to a degree. But there's a lot of people, especially the younger people, Gen Z, who are choosing sides in a war. The case I'm going to try and make today is overall, that's not a good thing. And I'll get into that. But you'll see where they'll choose, and there's a lot of symmetry. They'll choose the side of Ukraine and also choose the side of Iran. They'll choose the side of in their own country. They'll choose the side of people outside of their country over the people inside of their country. And there's a lot of symmetry with that. There's a lot of, parallels where you could see that it's all rooted in the same thing. But what it really comes down to is war itself is evil. War comes from the devil. If you look at the first war that ever existed throughout all of history is the war between God and the devil. But that war was started by the devil. When God cast Satan out of heaven, the angel Lucifer, he fell and began warring against God because he was angry that God cast him out. Now, what God did wasn't an act of war. It was pushing him away because he didn't want him near him. He didn't want confrontation. He didn't want the evil that he had now created or established to infect heaven and to infect God's ways because God's perfect and he couldn't have that energy around him. So that's not an act of war. It's like if somebody's trying to fight you and you walk away or they're in your house and you make them leave. That's not an act of war. That's an act of diffusion. You're diffusing the war from happening. The devil retaliated by trying to destroy God's creations, especially and mainly mankind. And so also taking the legion of angels with him. So war was originally started by the devil. But now there's a caveat to that. It says in the Bible that war sometimes is a possibility. There is a time for war, it explains. And that's true. It doesn't mean that war is good. There's a time for a lot of things that aren't good. That's just because the way that life is, right? Hence, that's life. There's a time for all things, and there's a time for war. But in a war, you're going to have two sides. And the way that it works is all war is evil, but both parties don't have to be. But one party always is. And I'll explain. Essentially, there's always two sides to every war because the original war is between God and the devil, and the sides are between good and evil. Now, you can have a war that's outside of that, which is what most wars are like, where it's evil versus evil. And that's typically what happens. You'll have two sides that are evil, and they're fighting each other. And then every once in a while, you'll have a war where one side's good, one side's evil, but they're in a war together. And I'll make cases for all this. Most of the wars you see are evil, run by evil people. And I won't say specifically which ones for sure. That's for you to decide if you choose to choose a side. But looking at the wars that we just mentioned right now, you can decide if that fits those people, those sides. And if you're choosing to back one of those sides, you're siding with evil. You're siding with the devil, in which case you're in the wrong as well. You shouldn't do that. Now, if there's a side that's on the side of good that's doing God's will, and you choose to support it and back it, that's a different situation. But you should really know when you're looking at both sides of the war. Ask yourself, do either of these sides have God's interest in mind? Are they trying to carry out God's will? Are they fighting for a cause that God sees as just and is allowing them to endure this war to an outcome where he will either bless them or curse them? Ask yourself those questions before you support either side of a war. Now, if you look at Ukraine and Russia, we'll take a quick look at that. So just in case you don't know, because you haven't looked at a map, this is Russia and this is Ukraine right here. Small country compared to Russia, but it's bordered with Russia. And these two countries are at war at a high level. Now, you do have other major countries adjacent, which have been the center of some big wars in the past. But as you can see, Russia is trying to conquer Ukraine, and Ukraine is trying to fight to not be conquered because they don't want to be under the jurisdiction or rule of Russia. Now, looking back, this is what Russia used to look like when it was the Soviet Union. You still had Ukraine right here. And this is more towards the end where they declared that they were their own country in 1991, which we'll get to. But this is 1989's map. It was already, declared at that point. This was how it looked under the Soviet rule for a very long time. And at one point, the Soviet Union was a big threat and enemy to the United States, even up until Reagan was president. And that was that whole thing with the Cold War that, you can look back in your history books and learn about that. So now we'll look at it in a nutshell. What's this war about? Putin wants Ukraine to reestablish a Russian sphere of influence and prevent Ukraine from aligning with Western institutions like NATO, which he views as a threat to Russia's security. Additionally, he aims to suppress democratic movements that could inspire similar change within Russia itself. Now, that makes perfect sense. And there's more to it. There's more to it for sure. It's never just about one thing or maybe even two things. For you to go to war, it probably has to be something, major for it to be one thing, or it's a bunch of things that pile up and then eventually you realize that's the best outcome. Putin clearly wants to reestablish the Soviet Union, and he feels he needs Ukraine to do that. Typically, when you see a country secede from its original parent nation, it doesn't go back. So I don't see this long-term outcome working out for him where he gets Ukraine back, because that typically does not happen throughout history. When a country secedes, it's only a matter of time before other members of that parent nation decide to also start breaking off and doing their own thing, or fighting for revolution in their own country to change it into something else, into a new governing system, or break up the land in a certain way, or another country conquers it. But typically you don't see a country reabsorb a nation that seceded and became its own nation, a landmass that did that. So it seems like he wants to reestablish the Soviet Union to increase his footprint across the world and become the world superpower once again. Ukraine does not want to rejoin Russia because it seeks to maintain its sovereignty and independence, especially after Russia's annexation of Crimea and ongoing aggression in eastern Ukraine. Many Ukrainians view the war as a fight for their territorial integrity and democratic values, rejecting any compromises that would undermine their national identity and freedom. So essentially what this war comes down to is Russia wants to reestablish the Soviet Union and feels they need Ukraine to do that. Ukraine doesn't want to be a part of Russia anymore, wants to continue to be independent and operate the way they are. But they have a poor leader who is an embarrassment, really. And their nation is really not that good. It's really not a very prosperous nation. It's not a nation that is amazing and doing great things and contributing to the world and known for its innovations and known for its, technological advancements or cultural advancements or whatever. It's just a nation that exists and is kind of just doing what it does and has a lot of raw minerals, resources, things like that. So I don't see them being reabsorbed by Russia long term. But I do also understand that Russia, Putin's concerned because he's trying to, control his territory, his land, and his nation and his people. It sends a bad message if they get away with it, because then it shows that Russia's weak and they can't force Ukraine to be become part of Russia again, which would send a message to the rest of the people in Russia that maybe it's time for them too to revolt and, fight back against the power structure and fight for their freedoms and their rights and things like that. It could also lead to the Russian people looking at America and saying, you know what? Look at their leader. He's a man who wants peace. He's a man who wants freedom. He's a man who wants to continue his nation, which is an independent nation, to continue to be free. And he's trying to broker peace deals with the rest of the world. And their people are free. They get to live with freedom for the last 250 years now, for the most part. It might inspire them too to say they want their own independence. They want freedom. They don't want to be in a socialistic type country anymore. Now, will Putin lead that charge and transform them into the next America type nation where they are free and they are independent and they have their own constitution and the people have a huge say in government and, other things that mirror America? Or will they, get disgusted with him and push him out and, seek freedom and independence in their own way? I don't know. The future will tell. But I don't see Ukraine being reabsorbed by Russia. And I don't see them losing this war, but I do see that there has been a lot of people killed so far. I think it's over 1 million people now, which I think you can research it online. I've looked it up already, and I think it's over 1 million, which is a lot bigger than people realize. Like, that's a lot of people in many wars in the past in America that America has fought. We have not lost that many people. So it's a big number. Now, Russia is a big country, but it's a big number. It's clear that neither side wants the war, but neither side wants to end the war enough to where they're putting pressure on their government to do so. So taking that, for example, that war alone, just that one, and there's many going on throughout the world right now, I can't see anything in that, and I've done further research too, that shows either side is good. They seem like they're both operating on their own selfish interests. And none of them, to my knowledge, what I can see, seem like they're doing God's will. So in that sense, they're both operating from a place of evil, which means that both sides are wrong. And for the people, especially in America or other countries who have no affiliation with them, to choose a side, it's not a good thing. You should focus on your own country and what happens here and how you can be a better supporter of the things that are right and righteous in our land versus what's going on throughout the world. But I do understand you have the freedom and the right to do whatever you want. If you want to support another nation, you can. But you're supporting one of two sides that are on the side of evil. So, like I said, you can have two sides that are on the side of evil. You could also have one side that is on the side of good. I'll give an example of that now, which is America, of course. America had been at a nonviolent war with Great Britain for a while before they actually went to war in the late 1700s. And it was only because King George pushed it so much, he decided to try and conquer Americans. Americans never wanted to go to war. They wanted peace. They were trying to work out treaties and deals and, set up an infrastructure that allowed them to, cooperate with Great Britain, but still be their own independent country. And there were many people in America that didn't even want to go to war for their independence because they just didn't want to go to war. They didn't believe that that was the right thing to do. But in this case, America, and I've talked about this many times in the past on this channel, was set up and created by God. It was the first nation that was established to be a Christian nation. It was the first nation that was established to be a home for God's Christian people and ultimately became the new Israel, which is what we still currently are today. Yes, we've gotten very far from God's will for us. And we're at a place where we're at a crossroads. Whether or not we're going to go on into the future to continue to be the world's superpower and continue to be great and a light on the hill and the nation that other nations look to as an example of how to be a nation, how to be a country, or we're going to go down the other path of the end of America. And that future is coming soon. I don't know when. It could be 100 years from now, but it's coming soon. It's coming where America is going to have to go down one of those two paths. Are we going to turn back to God and be a Christian nation once again and continue to be the greatest? Or are we going to fall and just be part of the history books? But that war was allowed by God, and the people prayed countless times. The government prayed. Congress got together and prayed together to decide what was best for them, what was the right thing to do, what was God's will for them. And at every angle, at every corner, God kept revealing to them that ultimately they were going to have to go to war with Great Britain in order to fight for their independence. And they did. And many, many Americans died in order to have that freedom. But the war still went on. And the smaller nation of militiamen that did not have the technology and advancements that Great Britain had won against the world's greatest superpower. And there were so many instances where Great Britain had the advantage and they still lost because of unique circumstances that clearly shows it was God's divine intervention. So that's an example of a war that the war itself was not righteous or good because it's war, but God's people were on one side of that war and they were good. And so God allowed them to win. You'll never see a war with two sides being Christians and God's people, because God's people don't war against each other. If they do and are, then they're not God's people, and they're lying, masquerading as God's people. God's people will always find a way to broker peace and will always find a way to negotiate how to work out the situation where they don't have to go to war and where everybody can have something that they win out of that deal. But both sides will not be good. So if that's what you're thinking, well, maybe maybe there's a war where there's two good sides. No, there's never a war where there's two good sides. There's only wars where there's one good side or both sides are evil. But the majority of the time, both sides are evil and in the wrong, because very rarely will God allow or want a war to exist, only if he sees it as the only way for his people to move forward with his will. And that is the classic example of the war of independence, the American Revolution, that America endured with Great Britain. That is one of the few times throughout history where you can see that God has had his hand on those people and on that war. And there was clearly a good side and an evil side. And now you can look throughout history and see in hindsight that's the truth, because America grew and became the world superpower. Great Britain fell and divided up into many different territories that are now all their own countries. And you can see right now, too, in many instances in the world, it's clearly about religion, because America is the only nation that's declared Christian nation. Yeah, we have a lot of different people here believe in different things, and that's fine. We accept other people's right to have religious freedom, because that's what this nation was founded on for the Puritans and the Pilgrims that came here originally. But the nation itself at its core is a Christian nation. And you can see this with our leader, who is trying to broker peace deals all around the world. He is the light. He is the voice of reason. He is acting on God's behalf, on God's will. And you can tell because Jesus is the Prince of Peace. Same thing, always wanted peace, always wanted love, always wanted people to be together and connected. Look at the United States. God unites. He doesn't typically divide. Sometimes, but not typically. He unites his people. That's why we're called the United States. We're not a large country that's just totally one nation. We're a nation of 50 states that all came together and decided to be one nation. We are united as one, but we are all our own individual states with individual laws, by the way. And that's what America's being again in this world, with Trump as our leader, being the broker of peace, following in God's will, in Christ's will as the Prince of Peace, while all these other nations war because they're not in God's will. They're not trying to carry out God's will. And if any one of those nations that are going through a war right now would turn to God and accept Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior and pray to carry out God's will, if he would just show them the way, they would have a clear path forward to wherever it is that they're meant to go. And, will they win those individual wars because of that? I don't know, but they will definitely have a clear path forward as to where their nation is supposed to end up. If they turn from their wicked ways, it says in the Bible, God will heal their land. So I would implore the people online that are siding with one side or the other, instead of doing that, why don't you recommend each side turn to Christ and try to carry out God's will? And maybe the war would end or go differently, where they would find a path to peace. They would find a path to a win-win situation where they both get what they want. But my recommendation, especially for the younger people, is don't choose a side blindly. If you are not sure if they are on the side of God, then don't support anything. Stay out of it. If it's something you truly feel convicted to do by God because they clearly are on the side of good, then that's a different situation. But don't just follow the trends and don't just support blindly for social media follows and likes and things like that. because God is watching and he will see where you put your allegiance. And if it's not in him, it's in evil, and you will be judged on that. And this is happening in America too. Like I said, there's a crossroads where the war is happening here as well. In the past, it was America versus the outside enemy, Great Britain. Then it was America versus the Indians within its country, but still not Americans. Those were separate people. Then it was America versus itself, the North and the South, with the Civil War. Now it's going to be America versus the government partnered with other Americans, all scattered throughout the nation, in the North and the South, everywhere, East, West. And it's really coming down to a war of politics, liberal versus conservative, especially liberal woke ideology versus conservative Christian, Republican, Democrat. And essentially, it's one side is with the government through the Democrats, but mainly the government bureaucracy and that type of different authoritarian governing system that's separate from our constitutional republic, and the conservative Christians that are choosing to allow certain members of the Republican government on their side versus being on the side of the government. Instead, they're pushing back against things that even conservatives that they voted in are doing, because they're trying to get the government to go back to doing the will of the people, which is ultimately the will of God, and governing our country as our representatives the way that we see fit, because we, the people, rule the nation, not government. And that war is really coming down to the people versus the government. The government is partnered with certain types of people in America, mostly liberal Democrats. And we are headed down that path where, this is going to go one of two ways. Either America is going to continue to heal, more and more people are going to continue to turn back to God, and this nation will be a conservative Christian nation once again. Doesn't mean every single person is going to be, but for the most part, the power will be held in the hands of those who are of that mindset, and the nation will heal and the nation will be blessed again, and we will go on to do great things in this world. Or it's going to fall. It's going to fall, and there will be a war. There will be a separation, and there will be a division in the way that our system is governed going forward. Now, I'm more optimistic. I'm not like a lot of the people online that are doom and gloom, assume that we're, headed towards the end of the world and it's the end days and all that stuff. Yes, biblically speaking, it technically is the end days since the time that Jesus returned and left. But end of days could be forever. It could be 100,000 years for all we know. So I have more of an optimistic mindset. I think that if the people continue to turn back to God, which record numbers are turning to Christ. They are giving their lives up to him and getting baptized. And even in very liberal states like California, thousands upon thousands of people are being baptized in a single day. It truly is unprecedented what's happening with the Christian revival in this country. Even the, I think it was Asbury Church. I think that was the name of it. It might have been in Kentucky. I'm not sure. They had that revival for, weeks on end, 24/7, people praying and worshiping. And, there clearly is a revival of Christ and Christianity in this country again. So I do see that, and I am optimistic about the political future of this nation too. Being that if the, you know, rules and the laws continue to get corrected about how we do things, especially when it comes to elections, then you will probably see another Republican be elected right after Trump. Now that's up for debate as to whoever it is. It's still kind of early, and the midterms are first. That will determine a lot more things that, happen with the presidential election after that. But, I definitely see at this point pretty much just two paths as to who the next person will be. And that's only because of where we are now. Anything could change in 6 months. Somebody new could come up and somebody could, really, shake things up and be a voice that people, like and associate with. And, if they get Trump support, obviously that could even add to it. But we don't really know. We can just go by where we're at today, which is how I just like to, assess things, is just basically where we're at now. The goalpost could move, we don't know. But at this point, I would say it's probably going to be Ron DeSantis who's going to follow Trump and continue to, implement things that he was doing, continue to pick up on his legacy and carry the torch further, and really change a lot of things with the laws and correct things that were, wrong and, unlawfully done over the course of the last 50 to 80 years in this nation as they tried to dismantle our governing system, the constitutional republic that we have, you're probably going to see, he seems like the most plausible choice just because of who he is and how good he is at governing and, you know, um, carrying out, strength and leadership and, continuing what looks like he could do is continue the Trump legacy well, which very few people at this point can actually, keep up with, what Trump has done. I mean, as a governor, Ron DeSantis is the Trump of states in America. His state, Florida, was the best performing state. It's an amazing state. And by the way, it wasn't that way for a long time. Florida essentially really didn't have many jobs outside of the amusement parks and some other things, Miami, things like that. It was not a great state to go to economically for a very long time in this country. But he changed that. It's now become like an epicenter in America where a lot of, companies are fleeing to reincorporate there. And it's really energized a lot of business and people moving down there from major, major cities like New York City, which at one point was the #1 top city in the world to go to and to work in. People from all over the world used to work in Manhattan, and it's not as much that way anymore. It still is because it'll take a long time for a city that big to fall, but it's already on the decline. And a lot of those people are moving to Florida. So Ron DeSantis has the best chance, in my opinion. Next best chance at this point, I would say, is definitely Marco Rubio, who I've said before on this podcast that I think he's doing a great job at, keeping up with Trump and fulfilling, his agenda as Secretary of State and, keeping that same level of, leadership that Trump has just in his own way. And I also see a major transformation in him where I don't know him personally, and I haven't seen anything where he said this, but I can sense that he's had some sort of, revelation or something happen in his life where there has been a radical change in him. He looks to me like someone who has gotten saved and who has decided to change his ways and carry out God's will. And I've seen him mention God on many occasions, so I know that he's a believer. And there clearly seems to be some sort of radical change in him. That's just my best guess, but this nation needs a leader like that that's willing to stand up and speak for God and to, carry the torch of Christianity once again in this nation without fear of stupid things like people criticizing him for picking a certain religion or whatever, even though this nation was founded on that. And I think when somebody really digs deep into the roots of this nation, going all the way back to its discovery with Columbus and, everything after that, the case will be made that this nation was declared a Christian nation by God. And so it should be even easier to re-implement Christian values in this nation once again, because this nation is and was designed by God to be a Christian nation. Doesn't mean we hate other religions. Doesn't mean they can't even come here and practice their religion and be, free to do so. It just means that America has to remain a Christian nation at its core. So we'll see. But as of this point now, in August of 2025, I'm leaning more towards DeSantis being the next one, and then Rubio being either his VP or, um, a backup to um, if DeSantis doesn't work out for unforeseen circumstances. I would I would I would personally vote for Rubio. But yeah, that's where we're at. That's the crossroads that this nation is on. Hopefully, it doesn't go to the bad side of leading to war and stuff like I just said, because war, like I said, is evil, and we don't want to be roped up in that because it's if there's a way to broker peace, if there's a way to go towards peace, we should always choose that. And sometimes you're going to have to sacrifice in life for the sake of peace. And that might be giving up something that you care deeply about. If it'll bring peace to the situation, God will bless you even more than what you're giving up. So don't be afraid to do that. And don't get so caught up in the things of this world because they're not permanent. You are going to have to give up things from time to time and make sacrifices. But that's okay because none of this stuff is yours to begin with. So for the younger people, try not to choose a side blindly. You can if you want. You have freedom if you so choose. But my recommendation, like I said throughout this video, is to definitely do your research and find out if, what do those sides want? What are they fighting for? And then see, is it selfish stuff? Is it things that, their egos are in the way? Is it about power and control? Because if it's about those things, then you really don't want to get behind that. You really don't want to support that because that's all coming from a place of evil. Very rarely is it going to be from a position of carrying out God's will and doing the righteous thing. So be careful who you support and back. And there may be one or two wars right now where one side is God's people, and it's okay to support those people because God wants to see you stand up for him. But if you're not 100% sure, you might not want to get behind them. So anyway, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Stay for the ad at the end of the video. It has a little information about my children's book, which I wrote. It's available right now on all the major platforms, and it's a great book at a great discounted rate right now. The holidays are coming up soon, so you might want to start getting some of those items, the book and some of the stuff we have on the Amazon storefront or the apparel shop, which a percentage of those purchases go to charity. Get those in time for the, holidays for the remainder of this year as we head into the fall and the winter, and stay tuned for the next one. All right, everybody, I just want to take a moment to promote my children's book. This is Little Boy Full of Love. That's me on the back, and this is a little sneak peek on the inside. It's a great book. It's a children's book. I actually wrote this for my son, and it's available right now on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, Bookshop.org, and a lot of other online platforms. But more importantly to me, it's actually available in a lot of bookstores throughout the country. You can find out which ones are closest to you on my Instagram page. We highly recommend that you shop local, buy from a local bookstore. So if you are looking to, get a children's book for you or anybody you know, or even with the holidays coming up, it's a great time to, buy a children's book as a gift. Definitely get it from a bookstore that's local to you. But if you absolutely can't get it from one of the bookstores that are currently carrying it right now, and we're in about 15 or 16 different states across the country, so it may actually be in your state, and it could even be local to you. But if you can't get it from the physical bookstore, check out our Amazon storefront. The book's available on there right now. And like I said, with the holidays coming up, you may want to do your Christmas or Hanukkah or holiday shopping early, and you can even order it from our Amazon storefront and ship it directly to whoever you're gifting it to. But it's available on those platforms, Amazon storefront and bookstores and other websites that I mentioned. But I want to take a moment here to look at the storefront just to give you an idea of some other stuff that we have available on there. These are products that we highly recommend. They are things that we use in our daily lives, and it's all organized by category. So it's a lot easier to, shop for the holidays and specifically for things that interest you, particular categories. Available right now, many different items on our storefront. If you can see here, 61 items just in women's apparel, fall decor, because right now we're in fall, 26 items, kitchen items, baking specifically, things for around the house, children's toys, even stuff for parties. If you're trying to save money on a party and throwing your own, occasion, you can even buy some cool gadgets here to help you, put on a better party. Health and wellness items here, even stuff for Christmas. And there's the book right there. So you can get it from the storefront. You can get it from the bookstores, like I mentioned. But it's available on all these different platforms. It's really easy to find and gift to somebody. Also, I want to show you the apparel shop. And these are some clothing items that we actually produced. So if you're looking to get some cool apparel items, shirts, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, leggings, even accessories, cell phone cases, women's makeup bags, fanny packs, coffee mugs, all different types of stuff, even some, art, all different categories here, apparel, homeware, accessories, drinks, even digital items. It's all on this store, healthybodygoodssoul.com. Anything that pertains to you or somebody that you're looking to get a gift for the holidays. A lot of great designs on here, a lot of cool designs that we actually custom created. Stainless steel water bottles, especially now with the fall and winter. A lot of cool hoodies and long sleeve shirts. This is a really cool one, I think, for women. The original Be Your Soul apparel, that one's actually really popular. People tend to like that. This one's one of my favorites. The free shirt. It's the American flag, and it says free, and that says not property of the United States government. That one's pretty cool. Got all different types of tank tops, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, tote bags, coffee mugs, even some items for kids, backpacks. So if you're the type that likes to, plan ahead, I would definitely recommend ordering from the Amazon storefront or the apparel shop within the next couple of weeks to get everything in time for the holidays. Use code SAVE15 on the apparel shop to save 15% off everything on the storefront. So order within the next week or two, and you'll definitely have everything in time for the holidays. Definitely check out all the links to everything, the Amazon storefront, the book, and the apparel shop in my bio on all my platforms: Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. But you can also find them in all the show notes for every episode that I post, and get all your orders in time for the holidays. All right, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps the channel continue to grow. And put in the comments things that you would like me to talk about and make videos on for the future, and I will definitely do my best to do that. Stay tuned for the next one.